high school in 1930, women made up just 21% of the workforce, and even then the positions they took were mostly quote-unquote women's work, like teachers, secretaries, household help. But Jackie had a different path in mind. Her ambition and persistence landed her a job as a proofreader at the Pittsburgh Courier at just 18. But even if you were a working woman in this era, that usually ended when you got married. There were even marriage bars at the time, policies that required women to be fired once they got married. Naturally, Jackie didn't buckle under those expectations when she married Earl Ormes in 1931. Instead, she went on to make history. At the time when Jackie decided she wanted to get into cartooning for real, the Black community had very little representation in mainstream American comics. As the Second World War raged, so did many African-American-run newspapers, protesting the oppressive social and political policies that burdened the Black community. But the funny papers, aka the comics pages of the newspapers, had a unique advantage. While editors and writers would often be threatened and intimidated into reining in their content, cartoonists were largely left alone, and with the lack of oversight, they could criticize unjust policies without consequence. When Jackie began her second comic, Candy, published in the Chicago Defender, she took the opportunity to protest the low pay and unfit working conditions a lot of Black domestic workers would endure in white households. A beautiful, well-spoken, wisecracking housemaid jabs at the moral hypocrisy of her unseen employer. But what was most interesting was Jackie's approach. A lot of comics with political overtones at the time could be merciless, directly attacking policies or people. But Jackie used a more approachable setup to lampoon important issues. Jackie went out and advocated for civil rights and community advancement in her daily life outside of her creative pursuits too. In her cartooning heyday of the 1950s, Jackie would capitalize on her fame to raise money for charity and social justice causes. She'd attend community and charity events, speak on panels for high school career days, and answer letters asking for advice, encouraging young people to pursue their dreams despite any obstacles, just like she'd done her entire life. A few years after Patty, Joe, and Ginger began, Jackie started another comic that would run for 4 years, this time a full strip in full color. Torchy and Heartbeats followed a socially conscious, mature young career woman. Kinda like a spy story with a whole lot of romance, the comic touched on, you guessed it, issues surrounding race and the experience of women at the time, but also things like environmental pollution, a virtually unheard of issue at the time. But by the mid-1950s, Jackie's hands had started to stiffen and ache in the mornings. It was a sign of the rheumatoid arthritis that would eventually make it impossible for her to move without suffering extreme pain. When Patty Joe came to an end in 1956, it also signaled the end of Jackie's cartooning career. Jackie Ormes was unstoppable. Like the bars of soap she'd sculpted into works of art as a kid, she sculpted her world into the world she wanted to see. And when she'd achieved her own dreams, she dedicated the rest of her life to helping others achieve theirs. Jackie drew until she physically could not hold her drawing tools anymore. And even then, when most people would quit, she picked up a paintbrush instead, and she continued to paint for years. She refused to back down even when her own body began to deteriorate. And after everything, she still didn't feel entitled to even be remembered. In 1985, just months before she died, Jackie said in an interview with the Chicago Reader, "I'm always surprised when people remember me." 33 years later, she was immortalized in the Will Eisner Comic Industry Hall of Fame. Jackie Ormes will be remembered as a trailblazer. She'll be remembered as a philanthropist, a feminist, a caring and compassionate human being. She'll be remembered as the first Black American woman cartoonist. Jackie Ormes will be remembered as an unstoppable force.
What's up, everybody? It's Elan Jones, and today I want to talk about this Google Doodle. This is of Jackie Ormes. You just saw the clip. Now you know who she is if you didn't know who she was. And listen, I didn't know who she was, and I can't believe that I didn't know who she was. A light-skinned Black woman, fully Black, light-skinned American Black woman. This is a part of American history, and I'm very proud of her. And I actually teared up a little bit towards the end. It was a really nice thing to see. So Jackie Ormes was in September 2020's Google Doodle. Now I actually remember this when I was on Google at that time. And shout out to one of my subscribers for pointing this out to me. So I didn't know who this woman was. And I thought to myself, okay, it's some Dominican lady. I felt like it had nothing to do with me. I didn't click on it. And I can only wonder how many other people felt the same way. Oh, it's some Hispanic woman. They would have missed out on learning about Jackie Ormes, right? Because she was not illustrated in her true image. Now, as you can see, she's, I don't know how many shades darker in this illustration. And she was actually illustrated by a girl named Liz Montague, who happens to be the first Black female cartoonist to be published in the New Yorker. So this is who illustrated her. She says that this was her paying tribute to Jackie Ormes. She knows all about Jackie Ormes. She looks up to Jackie Ormes. So she knows Jackie Ormes' true image, yet she illustrated her looking this way. So Liz Montague drew Jackie Ormes in her own likeness.
When I'm sketching and drawing, I'm really not filtering myself at all. Probably the only place I'm not filtering myself. My own experiences influence all of my work, really, because I think that that's my primary lens for just kind of looking at the world and then observing the world. How I approach cartooning and just like illustration in general is that I'm going to be an expert on my experience and then try to communicate that. I'm Liz Montague. I'm 24 years old and I'm a cartoonist and illustrator. I was 22 at my first job, and I was like at my desk on Instagram scrolling through the New Yorker cartoons Instagram, and just noticed that all of the cartoons were white, and that was probably the case because everyone making them was white and all of the editors looking at them were white. And then it's just like, it's so normalized that no one sees it. I was like, oh, well, maybe they just don't know, and just like hit the email button and then didn't expect at all to get a response. I was on Amtrak and I got the email and I freaked out and was just like, oh my gosh, they actually read these emails, who knew? And it just basically said that, you know, she was aware and like really wanted to, you know, make a change, and asked if I had anyone in mind. And I was just like, you know, I could take a stab at this. I was really curious at first if I was the first Black woman to have a cartoon published in the New Yorker, just because the whole reason that I had reached out in the first place was because, you know, a lot of the cartoons look the same. I think diversity and representation in cartooning and illustration are important. I mean, because I think unless you're from the communities that are missing, usually you can't really tell that you're missing.
As the first Black female cartoonist to work for the New Yorker, she came in there and she started drawing characters that were in her own image. That's fine. You're the only Black one. You're going to draw Black characters. And, you know, she talked about social issues too. Some of these SJW themes she has in her illustrations, and they published it in the New Yorker. Whenever they hire a Black person for something, you know that they're going to bring with them Black activism, right? So she did this. But Jackie Ormes also did that. You know, there's nothing wrong with it per se, but there's something about this illustrator that's just very self-centered. Now, this is only one person. This is an individual. This is an individual Black woman, right? But we seem to have a very long history of this type of thing happening, turning light-skinned historical figures, brown skin, or dark skin to reflect who they want to reflect. This is something that the Black community feels is best to do. Why is that? Now, this isn't the hate you give. This isn't replacing dark-skinned Aunt Viv with light-skinned Aunt Viv. And by the way, it came out why that actually happened, which was the original Aunt Viv's fault. But it's blasphemy to say that. She can't have any character flaws. It's everybody else's fault. So now it's light skin privilege, right? That light skin Aunt Viv got the part after the original Aunt Viv. Now everybody hates the light skin Aunt Viv. They say horrible things about her. But anyway, I want to remind people that white people are in charge of the media when that sort of thing happens, and that's important. But today I'm talking about historical figures. Historical figures not being shown in their true image. That's really important. If Storm is lighter skinned, if Aunt Viv is light skinned now, if originally Black cartoon characters are biracial looking now, That's not light-skinned people's doing. But when Black people have a little bit more control over their image in their movies and TV shows, what do they end up doing? This goes back to what I was saying about assimilation and contrast in reference to social comparison theory. What certain people tend to do. Black people, who are part of the majority, they tend to contrast against versus assimilate with. The lighter skinned population, the smaller population, usually assimilates with the bigger population. So you're going to see that when light skinned people have any say in Black issues, Black matters, they usually kind of erase their own image and they uplift the bigger group. They're uplifting the entire community, the larger Black community, because they feel a part of, they feel Black, and they feel like they want to use their platform for something that's going to be beneficial to their people. This is all I see. This is all I see online. This is all I've seen in history. And yet and still, Black people lie and say that light-skinned people are the enemy and they're out for self, etc., etc., etc. And that's not true. And this includes biracial people. Biracial people have also been very, very pro-Black. Unfortunately, they have to live their lives wondering why there's still so much hatred for them and so much slander. Some Black people may think that this is a clear example of privilege, so-called light-skinned privilege. And it's good that these light-skinned people, light-skinned and biracial people, are using their privilege to speak on behalf of the Black community. And that's what you're supposed to do. So I want to speak on that for a second. The reason why these light-skinned people are in the position that they were in is not because of privilege. The real reason why it's always a light-skinned person that's the trailblazer in the Black community is because light-skinned people are not comfortable. They're othered because they're light-skinned. The Black community treats them poorly. They don't really have a place where they feel like they truly belong. It's uncomfortable. Still, they love their people. They always give back when they can. Always try to create things for the Black race, as we can see. And when you're not comfortable, you either let your whole life get messed up, don't live out your dreams, give up on your dreams, be depressed, or it will give you more drive. Anyone in the Black community who's uncomfortable knows this. Black musicians, for instance, they say this type of thing all the time. A lot of them grow up in the hood and they've always been talented. They've always been different, and things have not been comfortable for them. They didn't have a comfortable upbringing. The people in the Black community that they grew up in recognized that they were different, that they were special, that they were more capable, whatever it was that made them different. You know, they always tend to stand out. So things are uncomfortable for them. What they end up doing is making the choice to work towards their dreams, and they end up being spectacular because of all of the adversity and all of the hard work that they had to put into getting there. They end up being spectacular people. They made the decision to do that. So you either do that or you don't. But when you do, the Black community is going to say, you only made it because of light skin privilege. At this point, it's not enough for someone who's not light-skinned to tell other people about what's going on with light-skinned people. Get a light-skinned person. So to all of the light-skinned people watching right now, to all of the biracial people watching right now, to all of the Black Americans watching right now, continue to be inspired by what your people have done. If you're stressed out because of your place in Black society, don't allow that to deter you from going for your dreams and having a good life, being healthy overall. Derive hope and inspiration from what the people before you have done. I'll catch you in my next video.